Okay, let's hop into section F3, coding the complex rehab power wheelchair. Just to give some of the course objectives is we're going to learn how to code the complex rehab power wheelchair base. There are two parts. Again, as we said before, you have the wheelchair base, and then again you have the seating system. So we need to focus on what sort of base are we giving this patient, how do we know what base we're giving the patient, and then we get to the seat as well. We'll also notice how the seat actually affects the coding base, and we'll get into that in just a bit. Understand how the patient's diagnosis affects the coding. Again, we've previously mentioned, depending on the patient's diagnosis, it can affect the actual group they're going to get in terms of the chair. The patient does not require to have a specific qualifying diagnosis to obtain a motorized wheelchair, but there are certain chairs that if the patient has a specific diagnosis, they can then be qualified for a better chair, a group 3 chair. Know the difference between group 2 versus group 3 versus group 4. There are different groups, 2, 3, and 4. There are differences in what they qualify for. There are also differences in what the actual chairs can do. In addition to being just a different code and a higher reimbursement rate or something you can modify, the group 2 chairs are obviously a little smaller than the group 3. The group 3 are slightly larger, group 4 larger than that. The difference that'll make, we'll see in a bit, how different motors you can put on, different electronics can accommodate. The bigger the chair, bigger batteries, the bigger the chair, faster, the bigger the chair, and so on. Learn the qualifying conditions for the Group 3 power wheelchair coverage. Know the additional documentation requirements for complex rehab power wheelchairs. Some of this we've already touched on previously in terms of motorized wheelchairs require the letter of medical necessity. And if it's not a complex rehab wheelchair, it does not require a letter of medical necessity, just a face-to-face. Know the additional staff requirements for complex rehab power wheelchairs. That is also something we touched on. Most of our course is going to be referring to items that fall into these categories because we are a custom wheelchair provider where we're working with assistive technology professionals who are providing a complex rehab. Coding the complex rehab base. Definition of a power wheelchair, just to give you a Medicare defines a motorized wheelchair, and when a manufacturer puts together a wheelchair and they bring it to Medicare, they say, is this a coded item or not? As you'll see when you get more familiar with the industry, there are many motorized wheelchairs that are not even coded. A lot of these travel along motorized wheelchairs that fold up and put in your trunk. These are not even coded. They don't fit the Medicare definition of and criteria for what they want, or the manufacturer didn't go through the extensive work to get it actually coded through PDAC because it's not the market they're looking to hit. In any event, definition of a power wheelchair, power base, chair-like battery-powered mobility device for people with difficulty walking due to illness or disability, with integrated or modular seating system, electronic steering, and 4 or more wheel non-highway construction. That's just the Medicare definition for a motorized wheelchair, for a power wheelchair. Coding the complex rehab base. Steps to correctly code a complex rehab power wheelchair base. So the coding depends on 3 factors. A, the patient's condition, the patient's weight, and the type of seating required. As we mentioned previously, the seating system on top of a motorized wheelchair will affect the motorized wheelchair base code. And you'll understand what that means in just a bit. But bear that in mind, the patient's condition, basically their diagnosis is, patient's weight is also because every wheelchair there's weight capacities we'll go through, and the type of seating system, is it a static seat, is it single power or multiple power. Just over here we have a snapshot of your power wheelchair performance. All power wheelchairs must have the specified components listed in the power wheelchair basic equipment package and meet defined performance requirements. The performance package will determine if the power wheelchair is a group 2, 3, or 4. Many times you'll have a motorized wheelchair where they some manufacturers have told me they had to dumb the chair down a bit. It was too fast and went into the wrong group that they were aiming for, so they had to make it slower. Let's say it came in as a group 4, which Medicare doesn't really provide group 4 chairs. They only provide group 2 and 3, so the manufacturer had to lessen the miles per hour, the range, and so on. So you see over here, power wheelchair base 2, 3, and 4 going across. Fatigue test and drop test seem the same. The length also the same. Width can all be the same. So fatigue test, drop, length, width also more or less the same in terms of it all fit the same category. But minimum top end speed Group 2 has to have 3 miles per hour for a minimum speed, 4.5 for the 3, and 6 miles per hour for the 4. Again, the motors and the engine will be a more sophisticated system and a larger system as it goes up in group to accommodate for either the minimum speed or the minimum range, 7 miles on a full charge, 12 miles, 16 miles, and then you also have the minimum obstacle climb. This is for like outdoor use or even indoor use, where you have the ability to climb over thresholds and so on. Dynamic stability incline, something else. Okay, factor 1. So we said we had 3 factors. We had the patient's condition, the patient's weight, and the seating system. So factor 1, why is this patient's condition considered first? This determines the performance group for which the patient qualifies. For a patient to medically qualify for a Group 3 power wheelchair under the Medicare local coverage determination, for power mobility devices, the patient's mobility limitation is due to a neurological condition, myopathy, or congenital skeletal deformity. What is the diagnosis that limits the patient's mobility? What diagnosis qualifies a patient for a Group 3 power wheelchair? So let's go into what would fall under the neurological condition, myopathy, or congenital skeletal deformity. We have a list over here. These included in this list. A list of diagnoses by itself does not automatically qualify. This is important to note. The list does not automatically qualify the patient for a Group 3 power wheelchair. This reference guide lists common neurological conditions, myopathies, and congenital skeletal deformities. This is not an all-inclusive list, and additional diagnoses may qualify the patient for a Group 3 power wheelchair. This will give you a rough idea of which patients would qualify for a Group 3 power wheelchair. You have angiohornus, CNS, cerebral palsy, Friedreich ataxia, hemiplegia, hemiparesis, hepatic neuropathy, Kugelberg-Wiener disease, MS, Parkinson's, Wernicke-Hoffmann disease, the quadriplegia, different levels of quadriplegia, incomplete or complete, spinal muscular atrophy, systematic torsion dystonia, TBIs, progressive muscular atrophy, cerebellar degeneration primary, post-polio. Myopathies we have over here: congenital myopathy, myasthenia gravis, myositis ossificans, muscular dystrophy, Huntington's chorea, osteogenesis imperfecta, and congenital skeletal deformities. We have Klinefelter syndrome and spina bifida. Again, this is not a full inclusive list, but this is a overall list of group 2. There's actually another diagnosis here that is not included here, and that would be stroke. We have it, CVA, cerebrovascular accident. Stroke is also a qualifying diagnosis for a Group 3. The next condition we're going to look at is the patient's weight. For Medicare coverage, the weight capacity of a power wheelchair provided must be suitable for the patient's body weight. Power wheelchair weight capacity coverage guidelines, effective after February 4, 2011, power wheelchair weight capacity defined as greater than or equal to 95% of the weight capacity of the next lower weight class power wheelchair. What this means is as follows. When you're providing a wheelchair for a patient, your standard duty power wheelchair covered for a patient weighing up to 300 pounds. So when we say 95%, what Medicare is saying by that is if a patient weighs 95% of a wheelchair weight capacity, you should then put them into the next wheelchair weight. So if a patient weighs above 285 pounds, that's more than 95% of the wheelchair weight capacity. Instead of putting them into the chair, and therefore they may gain a few pounds and then outweigh the chair. Medicare says a patient above 285, put them into the next group called the heavy duty power wheelchair, which is going to be covered for a patient weighing 285 pounds to 450 pounds. Because once we're within the 5% range of the wheelchair capacity, we want to put them into the next weight. However, if a patient received the chair and weighed 250 pounds, and now they put on 30 or 40 pounds and they weigh 290 pounds, they will not qualify for a new motorized wheelchair because they are not above the wheelchair weight capacity. In order for them to get a new wheelchair, if they're already a wheelchair user and they want to get a new wheelchair and it's less than 5 years, if they go above 300 pounds, they can say, look, the chair they have right now is no longer appropriate for them. But as long as they didn't go above the wheelchair capacity, they cannot qualify for a new chair. But if they are getting a new chair, not based on gain of weight, but they're getting a new chair for whatever reason they qualify for it, and they weigh 285 pounds, then put them into a above 300 pound weight capacity chair. So your weight capacities go to 300, your first one, then you got 450. So again, by very heavy duty, where it goes above 450. Sorry, down over here, your third option. If the patient weighs 428 pounds, already at this point, since they're within the 5% of 450, you put them in the next weight capacity that really goes 450 to 600. And then again, extra heavy duty cover patients weighing above 570, because 570 pounds is your 95% of 600 pounds. Our third factor here is the seating system. So depending on the patient's medical needs, there are basically 4 types of seating systems identified by Medicare. Again, the patient's limitations and medical needs that will require different types of seating systems, that will then identify what sort of base code is applied. So your 4 types of seats, you have your captain's chair. This looks like a van seat on a wheelchair base. Has very limited posture support, more than a scooter, but nothing more than that. If you follow the links in our handouts, you can see captain chair pictures and YouTube clips. Your next option, also a static seat, but not a captain's chair. The next option is called a sling or solid seat with a back. This chair is going to have a solid seat pan, which you then would put an upgraded seat cushion down on the solid seat pan. The patient will not be sitting on the metal seat pan. They'll sit on a higher coated seat cushion, and the back can either be the back that looks like a captain's back, or it could be looking like a sling back, which is kind of like the regular back of a regular manual wheelchair, just that sling material. Either way, option 1, option 2 are both static seats. The seat doesn't tilt, recline, or elevate. However, upgraded cushion on it, one does not have an upgraded cushion. Captain's chair is just the captain's chair. They sit on the captain's chair. Sling or solid seat back, that's going to have a solid seat pan. They need to put another cushion on top of that. Single power can mean either tilt or recline. If you look at the videos, you'll see what tilt means and what recline means, but just to try to demonstrate, tilt means that the patient's seated posture will not change, but the entire seat pan will kind of tilt backwards all the way up to 45 degrees, and that will change the patient's center of gravity, but will not change the patient's seated posture. Their hip to back ratio will not change, their knee will not change. It's just their entire seat stays the same, and they just change their center of gravity and kind of tilt back. Recline is where the patient's hip to back degree is what's going to open up. The patient's seat is going to stay where it is, but the backrest is going to fold downward, opening the patient's angle up to about 160 degrees of hip extension. Then multiple power options. Option number 4 here is where you have a combination of tilt and recline on the same seat. So even though tilt is one feature, recline is another feature, you can have both features on the same chair. Good to note, in regards to, let's say, weight shifting, a reason why you would recommend a tilt or a recline seating system. Power tilt, if a patient were to use tilt to perform independent pressure relieving activities, they would need to tilt all the way back to 45 degrees to have any sort of pressure relief with a change in center of gravity. If they were using recline only to perform a pressure relieving activity, they would have to recline their seat back to 150 degrees to facilitate a pressure relief. However, if they were to do a combination of tilt and recline, meaning if they were to tilt their chair as little as 15 degrees and to recline their chair back as little as 120 degrees, the Pittsburgh University of Pitt has found that they call that the optimal redistribution of weight, and therefore you can justify the need for a tilt with a reclined seating combination for optimal redistribution of weight, because you are optimally redistributing it by doing minimal of each one. Because to get a patient on a realistic level who is using tilt only to weight shift, and they go to 20 degrees, 25 degrees, if they're not going all the way back to 45 degrees, you will not be getting that weight shift effect that you're looking for.